Brew Nation, thank you so much for checking out another episode. Like, subscribe, comment, share. If you are listening in the show notes, there is this guy named Ted Trafford. He's awesome. He's been my LinkedIn connection for a while. He actually even has a YouTube video where he talks about clinical trial acronyms. Um, Ted is the director of business development for Probity Medical Research. He's been doing this almost 3 decades, guys. He said the date of this recording, what was it, Ted? Exactly what, 28 years?
28 years ago. Yeah, today.
Happy anniversary.
Thanks, man. Thanks
You
for
still
having me on.
remember the actual date? That's crazy. How do you do that? I don't remember the actual date I started.
I do because I was when I interviewed as a for a clinical research assistant position. I was fresh out of university, and went through the series of interviews, and so that's a momentous occasion. Your first job out of university, and yeah, the date just stuck with me, and
Wow.
I think it hit home because my boss, Dr. Kim Papp, came into my office on the first day and put the Code of Federal Regulations on my desk and said, "You need to know this." And so, you
Wow.
know,
So on day
being
one,
yeah,
that's how it was. Like you just got thrown in, it sounds like just like everyone else.
oh yeah, you gotta swim right away.
hmm And
Yeah,
we're going to get into exactly what Probity does, exactly what you've been. It's really rare to find someone who's been at the same company for this long.
it is. It
So,
is. There's so much movement in our industry,
yeah,
but
so I got to get into like why you haven't moved. Um, there's a lot of questions I have, and we were talking a little bit off the air about the wave of tech vendors entering our space, and really they're site centric, site solution oriented. We're going to get into that because I know one of the stakeholders you guys serve are sites as well. So it's site sponsors, CROs, tech vendor. You guys serve everyone.
yeah, it's developed so much over the years. Grown from a single site in the early days. So yeah, a lot of change. We've seen a lot of change in clinical research. When I started, there was no ICH guidelines.
We're going to go through just before we get into the show. Thank you to my four sponsors, Viva Site Vault. Are you familiar with Viva Site Vault, Ted?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So they do free eReg, free investigator site file. If you're a site afraid to dab their toe in the water of eReg, e-signatures, do you guys find that a lot of sites right now, Ted, are considering switching to all digital? Or
I think it's tough. You look at the variety of sites. Obviously, the big networks are a little more able to embrace these kinds of things and set them up. The single site sole proprietor, I think it can be really tough
yeah,
because there's definitely some investment in technology that's needed in order to get you there in time and resources and yeah. So it's something that I see in the future. It's going to be that's what we're going to be doing, but I think it's a hard transition.
it's a tough sell. You bring up a good point. Like 3 out of my 4 sponsors are free for sites, but free's not always free, Ted. You're right. Like somebody's got to invest into setting up the SOPs. Although these vendors do a good job of providing templates, but then the learning curve, and then the staff hesitancy. Like the more senior the staff, the more hesitant they are to adopt changes. So that's some of the challenges we have. But Viva Site Vault, go get it, guys. Link in the show notes. Next one, Versatrial. Have you heard of Versatrial?
Yeah, I know them well actually.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, engaged with Mike the first time a year ago, and yeah, really impressed with what they're doing. The way they're moving in this field, I think, is really impressive.
That leadership team, Mike, being a repeat serial entrepreneur or repeat founder and having successful exits, and he came to Yuma and visited me. You guys could go watch the podcast or listen to the podcast. Spent a day and a half just shadowing me. Like we were doing 2 screenings, or we were doing a randomization and a screening on the same day, and he saw all the chaos because it was a new randomization for a new study we had. So he's witnessed the entire chaos that ensued. And of course, things didn't go right. And it was perfect for him to witness things not going right because that's what happens like half the time. And he just gets it. I feel like he gets it. That's a technology. It's free, guys. Link in the show notes. Versatile keeps your studies organized, helps you with feasibility, but so much more than that. Go check it out, and I'm glad you get a chance to meet Mike, Ted. That's pretty cool. I think he's a cool guy too.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons they've been successful in their development is the amount of time that they spend listening to sites. And as a site network, it's so exciting to have those people that are willing to listen, because often, we're putting things out there and wondering if anybody's hearing us.
It's not tech forced on the sites. Like I feel like last decade, pre-COVID, it was, hey, sponsors forcing tech on sites, and so sites were like, yeah, we hate this idea of tech. Now it's sites optionally choosing, hey, I want this tech, I want this tech. This is seems like it's going to help my site grow. Versatile is definitely one of them. I'm gonna try to stump you. Maybe you don't know the next two. Inato, are you familiar?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You know all these guys. You're for 3 decades
We
into
have been
this.
around. It's yeah, no, it's exciting just to see, what they're doing, and the potential to kind of bring this together and collaborate. I think it's yeah, I think it's great. I'm trying to convince them that they need to add brand new sites to clinical research to
Yes.
their platform as well, and hopefully they will.
That's the next step for them. I think they have to ease into it because sponsors, it's free for sites, so Nato's biz dev for sites for those that don't know. But they really vet you. Like you kind of have to have experience and show proof that you've done similar studies for the studies you're applying for. But once you get to that like critical 2-year mark as a site, which my site's at, it's almost perfect timing to get into this. So Anato's free biz dev for sites. And they really vet, like they make sure that it's a study that you're going to do well on. I think that is a step that's missing because it's one thing to get studies for sites. My company, we help sites get studies, and we're going to talk about what you guys do with sites, Ted. But we help sites get study, and we do work with new sites. That first study is the hardest, but we don't necessarily make sure the client's a good fit. We leave it up to the client, say, hey, you're getting the study, make sure you can get patients for it. But Anata goes a step further because the sponsor is paying them. So that's their stakeholder. They got to take care of the sponsor, but it's free for the sites. Get on it, sites. Finally, Creo, eSource, eReg, CTMS, uh, financial report. Do you know Creo, Ted?
I do, yeah. Yeah, it's great to have these companies that are building tech for sites.
That's right.
And the more companies that get into the space, and the more tech that's developed, it's just going to get better and hopefully more affordable.
I love Creo. It's got everything built into it. CTMA, you don't need to buy all this like stuff. It's all there. eSource. What Ray's trying to do with getting rid of EDCs on the CRO side, that's something we need to look into. And I don't know. Did you, as somebody doing this for 28 years, Ted, did you expect this date to come where we're having this conversation about EDC and its redundancy and why it's needed?
In the early days, absolutely not. But of course, the early days were before EDC as well. But yeah, no, I think in the last 10, 15 years, we've been having a lot of discussions ourselves about it, because, I tend to look at things with, a long lens down the road, looking far into the future and trying to plan for that. And so it's something we've definitely been hoping that someday will come.
Okay, so you get in, you graduate college 95,
Yep.
all right? And you get in 95 as a managing director for
No,
probity.
I was an assistant. I was
Oh,
a
okay,
research
okay.
assistant back then.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
research assistant for probity medical research?
yeah. Just as it was getting
Wow.
founded, and
Wow.
it was a single site at the time. There was 5 employees, a couple of receptionists, a coordinator. I was a research assistant. My boss, Dr. Pap, dermatologist, and he was just getting started in clinical research. And yeah,
Wow. So this was a site that is sort of evolved
yeah,
over the
very much
decades.
so. Yeah. Well, what happened was Dr. Pap had this vision as he was starting in clinical research that he didn't want to do clinical research alone, that he wanted to collaborate with others, on research. And he also saw how hard research was. And so he wanted to try and build something that would remove some of the administrative burden from clinical trials. And that was back in a time where it's nothing compared to the administrative burden now. I honestly don't know how new sites get into clinical research and do it well right from the start with everything that we're forcing them to do.
Wow. Okay, so it started as a dermatology site.
Yep.
You just fresh out of college, research assistant. So far, it seems a very traditional route. Done with college, stumble into a small research site. How did you even find out about this career path? Like, how did you
Oh,
find out to
that's the
apply?
best part. So I had graduated university, and my parents had some friends that gave me a graduation card, and in the graduation card was a job posting for a research assistant. And at the time, I just knew, I didn't want to do my master's. I was done with school. I wanted to get working. And so, yeah, I went through series of interviews, got the job, and yeah, the rest is kind of
What?
history. Yeah,
So inside the graduation card was a purposefully planted hint
yeah, best
for what
graduation
you
present
should do.
ever. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So it was incredible. And then, yeah, it's been, well, you know what it's like to start a new company and the
Oh,
amount of
yeah.
work that goes into it. So, I was young, I had tons of energy, I was naive, and just poured myself into it, and I mean, it's still really exciting, but I really like building something and growing something. Yeah.
Wow. So you were like employee number 1 or
I was
2,
employee number 4.
number
Yep.
4,
Yep.
and you've stuck with them from research assistant all the way to biz dev director,
Yep. Yep.
uh, for 28 years, exactly to this date.
Exactly to this day. And it's been, like with everything, there's lots of challenges, lots of exciting things that happen. For many years, I think probably about 20 years, I served as the managing director for the company. I had a short stint as a study coordinator, so I've done that job too. Mind you, many many years ago.
So after research assistant was coordinator, I'm
Correct.
guessing.
Yep. Yep.
And then after how many years as coordinator?
Uh, I'm gonna guess probably 2 or 3.
Okay. And then after that, what came next? Because this company
And
must have evolved as your career was
that's
taking off.
exactly it. I grew up with it, right? And so then I became the managing director of a very small company. And to be honest, the title was a title more so that the pharmaceutical companies would pay attention to me when I reached out to them and emailed them,
I see.
and called them because it's tough when you are a new research site. Like I remember, so back then, most research was actually done at hospital institutions. There wasn't a lot of community based clinical research going on then. And I used to, call and email pharmaceutical companies, and I'd get responses back saying, oh, no, 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 we only deal with tier 1 investigators.
Wow.
And,
They
but
stopped saying that.
they did.
Imagine excluding
Yeah.
community-based clinicians because they're not in this hypothetical tier.
Yeah, but that's the way it was. And it just, again, because I was youthful, not afraid to make cold calls, I just stepped up the volume of cold calls and cold emails and, just leveraging everything I could in order to try and find us studies.
You're
And
right, because this was in the early days, like, email was barely a thing
right, I
around
was
this
using my
time.
own personal email address. We didn't even have company email.
I remember that when I started '05, I was using my Yahoo email, and then to be more professional, I still had my .edu university email, so I used that.
Yeah,
It wasn't like a few years later we got our own .com.
that's right. Well, and it was so expensive back then to get your own .com. It's
Forget
nothing.
about LinkedIn and all this stuff, but interestingly enough, LinkedIn came kinda early too, like, earlier than people think.
Yeah,
LinkedIn was
absolutely.
around, like, 2010, 2009, I remember I first got into LinkedIn, but 2009 would have already been 13 years into your career, no?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So, like,
So
the good first decade of your career was, like, no social media, almost no email.
yeah, yeah, for sure. But you may do like literally. I was making cold cold phone calls. I was getting the names of
Wow.
people that were involved in clinical research at different companies. And, we would connect with other researchers we knew were doing research and get them to make introductions or give us names. And yeah,
Wow.
uh,
If you had a time machine and go back to that, Ted,
yeah.
and say, "Hey, here's Inato.com, it's free." Like, "Here's your studies." Well, I mean, that would have been, like, sweet, right?
Oh, it would have been amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
The industry's evolved. I feel like people that are just getting in have no idea, and, I mean, maybe that's a good thing, I don't know. Do you see it's improving, or do you see it's, like, just
Oh,
opens up new challenges?
great question. So, some things are definitely improving. So I do agree with having more standardized regulations. The introduction of ICH back in the day was a really big step. It definitely helped. And then we have other things that are making research far more difficult because we have tech, and you mentioned tech forced upon us, and a lot of that tech is actually forced before it's ready to be launched. And I think
They
some
use us as the guinea pig. We're the sites. We're the in their clinical trial as you know, the beta users.
absolutely. And then, things don't go smoothly. And, sites get frustrated, and you wonder why recruitment slows when it takes you twice as long to see a patient in a study because of the tech that's involved. Like, we're far less efficient now than we
Mm.
were 10 years ago. The physicians in our network tell me that they're half as efficient. They see half the number of patients in a day that they did 10 years ago with all the tech that's been added to the studies.
In clinical research, right?
Yep.
Uh, I want to interweave between topics and back to your career, but I
Sure.
haven't lost my place. So today, one of the things we discussed before we started recording, which I'm debating just recording as soon as the guest comes on now, because there's so much good stuff like at the beginning, but I feel like that'd be too intense for a lot of people. Um, before we at least say hi. But Ted, we were talking about protocols getting more complex. I think that's one of the things where you've been in it a decade longer than me, but even me, like I'm old school now too. '05, I started. Studies were difficult, but they were still uh attainable for like real world patients. You know, like I remember one of my first studies was a schizophrenia study. My next one was a bipolar study. The majority of patients in our private practice with those conditions did qualify. You know, the wild card was, do they want to qualify? Will they be stable enough to continue? But it was never a question like, will this person randomize or not? It was like rare when you had a screen failure. Now it's super rare to find someone that's going to randomize. And I've interviewed other industry experts, and they said, well, exploratory endpoints are to blame, or the tech, maybe that's like a whole separate conversation. What do you think is going on? Like, are you noticing the same thing, or like what's happening?
Well, the protocols have definitely gotten more complex, but I think we look at all the things we've built into trials over the years. Like you said, the exploratory endpoints, and sometimes in studies we've got this just massive list of endpoints. but the protocols I don't think in their structure have evolved to really match the complexity of the trials. So, we were talking about the table of procedures in a protocol and how they'll have these footnotes that just go on and on and on. That, we're building a protocol that's inherently going to create deviations in a study just because they're getting so complex and there's so many little details and they're inconsistent or there's mistakes. And we back in the day we never used to have protocol amendments, and now you look at the volume of protocol amendments that come through because just to fix errors or typos, or we designed a study that we really can't complete, so now we have to modify the criteria. Protocols have need to change in order to make it simpler. And I'm excited that there's groups out there that are working on this, that that are trying to help push forward the idea that the typical study protocol is getting too complex, and we need to simplify it for the people doing the work.
It's interesting you say so at the protocol level. So it's not the IE criteria itself. Do you think it's like,
Oh, it's partly that they've
yeah?
gotten. You look at how long they've gotten. They didn't used to be that long.
I have one study with 55 exclusion criteria right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
And a
and
bunch of footnotes. They get into the Z. I think they used up like all the letters of the alphabet.
we're looking for that perfectly healthy patient with just that one condition that's being studied, and those people are really hard to find. We limit the BMI so specifically in so many protocols where it doesn't need to be as low as it is. We need to
Yeah.
be designing study protocols that are going to enroll patients and participants that at the end of the day would actually receive the drug once it hits the market.
Right. And at the same time that BMIs across society, Western society, are increasing. I mean,
Yep.
these are not real. And then you talk about going to underserved communities where this obesity epidemic hits hardest, and they say diversity. We want diversity too. So it's like, all right, you want all this stuff, but I mean, we'll try. That's basically like what it boils down to. We'll try. So you think like this redesigning? So okay, I think what you're saying is, hey, it looks like the IE criteria is not going to get simpler. So let's like not even fight that fight anymore. But we're looking at the protocol, like redesigning the protocol so that it's at least easier to follow. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. Or if it has to stay because, ICH has just come out with their draft new guidance, and they're basically dictating what a protocol is going to look like. And that's fine. I'm glad that there's some consistency internationally with having a standard. But we also need to think about how studies are actually done. And, that coordinator who is with the patient in the room, and how do we make it easy for them to do their job so that things don't get missed, so that the participant is protected and kept safe in the clinical trial. And as we build more things into these protocols, that's harder and harder to achieve.
I want to get back to your career as far as it's so rare for someone to stay with the same company. I mean, it's you and like literally the guest I interviewed last week, Esther Howard.
Oh
She
yeah.
stayed with a CRO. Do you know her too?
No, I don't. I met
Oh,
her
okay.
actually. I met her because of your interview.
Okay. That's right. That's right. I sent that group text, and then there was another TED. Apparently, there's a lot of TEDs out there. I was just
It's
naive,
a
man.
problem. There's so much confusion with TEDs.
She stayed with her CRO for almost 30 years too, until
Yeah.
she went out and became an entrepreneur. And I asked her the same thing, but it was a big CRO. You got in. It sounds like with like a startup that kind of
Yep.
became like a bigger company with you.
Yeah, I grew up with the company, right? And there's lots of trials and tribulations during that process. And there's also some really exciting moments. Like I love closing a deal, and I also love to take something and do it better than somebody else, to see a problem and solve it when nobody else could solve it. So, and that
Yeah.
happened a lot in the early days where, we would get this opportunity to do a study that was a really tough study. And we would just figure out how to do it when nobody else could. Like one of the studies we had in the early days was a psoriasis study with a new infusion drug. And this was back, just at the beginning of biologic treatments for different indications. And the infusion visits were 6 hours long.
I know.
And so so no wonder recruitment was struggling. There's a phase 2 trial, and so what we did was we just sat down and said, okay, how can we do this? Well, our investigator committed his Sundays for the next like 6 months, and we hired a couple of infusion nurses, and we would stagger the infusions. And so we'd make them an hour apart so we could get the people in, and they would sit around the boardroom table getting these infusions because that's the only space we had, and it turned it into this massive psoriasis support group. So patients
Wow.
loved it. And in a study where nobody could recruit, I think we put in like 28 patients, and managed to complete the study. Went on from there, and that was a huge milestone for us. And
Yeah.
sometimes
Did
you just
you
got to
ever
do what you need to do.
I love those like innovative strategy sites come up with. One of the things that Save Our Sites conference, and thank you for supporting us, Ted. Ted might be out there. He registered, but he may be out there, guys. So you might see him there. But if not, his LinkedIn's underneath this video and in the show notes. I I've dabbled with this support group thing too. It's funny that like independently we come up with our own ideas that are similar.
Yeah,
So back in 2010, I had a '09, I think, I had a really tough psych study, and it was Alzheimer's, moderate to severe. So what we did, we created a support group in our site for family members of Alzheimer's, and so they would come and meet other family members, and I'd have a social worker there, a therapist, just like leading the talks, and it did help get us patients. The We did get some pushback from sponsors though, because sponsors, while they liked the enrollment, because no one else was enrolling, they had concerns about, will patients talk to each other and try to figure out whether you're getting placebo, you're not? Like, are they going to look at the pills and try to compare or switch? They didn't want patients like interacting. And
which is crazy.
I know, I mean, I understand why,
Yeah.
but well, I guess what are your thoughts on it? Because did you have this pushback as well when you did the support group?
Um, I think the sponsors just the biggest concern was patient privacy. Were the patients okay with it? And you know what? If there was a particular patient that wasn't okay with it, then we would set up a separate infusion room for them, and they'd be in a private space. But for the most part, everybody just absolutely loved it because they finally had other people in common that understood what they were going through. So it was very positive, and it's actually really interesting because that the creativeness that we used to be able to complete that study and do well in that study came out of a miss in a previous study.
Mm.
We had been selected for a vaccine study, and we had a recruitment target of 75 participants, and I think we enrolled like 78, and we thought we had just done an amazing job. That was unheard of for us to enroll that many participants in the study,
Wow.
and we were pretty proud of ourselves. Set until we found out that there was another site that had enrolled 350 participants, and we just looked at each other and said, "Oh, we missed a huge opportunity here." So the next study that came around that was a big opportunity, we wanted to make sure we weren't going to miss out on it. And that happened to be that psoriasis infusion study.
Wow, interesting. So the dermatologist founder, I'm guessing, right? The
Yep.
PI was the founder. Um, is he still around, like involved?
Yeah, he still is. He's still the president of the company.
Wow.
Dr. Pap and I have been working together 28 years now. And
Is he on
yeah,
LinkedIn?
he is.
Wow, we can do a
Absolutely.
part two and have him on if he'd be down.
Yeah, for sure.
I would love to get him on. So it's interesting to have like because there's a lot of physicians, entrepreneurs that watch as well, and a lot of
Yep.
them are just thinking about getting started. So I guess I'll ask you, and I'll save some other questions for him. But moving from derm to because now you guys do so many different things, like at Probity, it's not just a site. Am I correct?
Correct. Yeah. So Probity Medical Research is a consortium of sites or network of sites. And we do have a lot of dermatology sites in our network, but we also have allergy, immunology, cardiology, rheumatology. And we now have, I think, 64 sites across 5 countries. So we're in the US, Canada, Australia, Chile, and Mexico.
Wow, you got Mexico on there?
Yeah. Yeah. And they're a large multi specialty site. So they kind of do everything.
We're gonna have to get you on. Let me write this down because we're gonna have to get you on Latinos in Clinical Research podcast as well,
That'd
to
be great.
discuss the Chile and the Mexico sites. Did you say any other Latin America countries?
No. And no.
You know, that's tough. One of my SOS business partner and Latinos in Clinical Research business partners, Judy Galindo, both her and I are on border towns. She's about 40 minutes from me on the California side. I'm on the Arizona side. We're both like bordering Mexico here.
Yeah.
And she actually tried to start a site in Mexico. And she was saying that their regulatory agencies there, I forget the name, um, their
It's hard.
version, what is it?
I can't remember either.
Yeah, their version of the FDA, they're so strict, they're so slow. By the time they got sponsored to say yes, it took like a year to get like approval. So she just gave up on it. So maybe we can do a whole deep dive into how you guys do this.
Yeah, it's really challenging because of the timelines in some countries, and on the flip side, their ability to recruit can be phenomenal. So sometimes they've only had the opportunity of a few weeks to enroll in a clinical trial, and yet they've done extraordinarily well with the short time frames that they might have.
It's insane. It's
Yeah,
insane. But really what my question was headed was leading towards was you said derm, then vaccine, then back to derm. What was this vaccine study? What was it for?
it
Not derm, right?
was no, well, yes and no. It was a herpes simplex vaccine.
Okay. Okay.
So
So
yeah,
same PI?
derm
Same
adjacent,
PI?
same PI. Yeah,
So when did he start or you guys start expanding? Like what was your first because I'm guessing the typical site that does this,
yep,
they start doing different therapeutic areas, then they have new sites, then they get into more stuff, and then eventually a small enough sponsor says, "Hey, do you help with like setting up a study?" And then that's kind of how it evolved for me on a small scale. How did it evolve for you guys to where you're like an advisor to CROs even and all kinds of stuff you got going on?
yeah. I think it's evolved because as opportunities presented, we seize those opportunities. So so that's the first part. The second part is finding good people. Like it all really comes down to good people. So one, having great staff. And by the way, those three other people that I started working with are still at the company. Um,
Wow, retention
and
high at
yeah,
your
so
company.
they're not with Probity, but they're with that clinical research site that is still in existence. So, but yeah, as far as uh, finding good people, so good investigators, good physicians who are good clinicians, who are willing to work, and are interested in research. And so, and for us, it was one at a time. So our very first foray into research with other physicians was in family medicine. So we knew lots of family medicine docs because they referred to the dermatology clinic. So we just started reaching out and saying, "Hey, are you interested in doing research?" And 27 years ago or 26 years ago, we had a sponsor that we had been working with in dermatology clinical trials that had a hypertension drug. And so
Wow.
they said, "Do you want to do a hypertension study?" So we said, "Yeah." So we contacted these physicians who were family docs who had patients who are hypertensive and said, "Here's our plan." And so this was really kind of the beginning of the whole kind of decentralized trials experience, where I would drive to the physician's office and I'd take the lab kit with me. I would take the drug with me. It was a simple study where you just gave the next drug in sequence, so it was really easy to do. And we that's how we followed patients at a number of different clinics.
Wow, yeah, and you guys do just about every indication, um,
Yeah,
these days, right?
well, not every. We're very much focused on the specialty areas that we work in, and so our model really works well with specialist sites. So, and it's growing in other therapeutic areas as we find a physician who either wants to expand their clinical research and make things more efficient at their site, or a new investigator who's wondering, well, how do I get into research?
I
And
see.
so, but it really was one physician at a time how we grew.
Wow.
And the next one was a urologist who was local in town and wanted to do research. And again, we find opportunities to work together, and it would grow from there until we were at the point where we thought we had everything in place to be able to support a site remotely. And so then our next foray was, hey, we've got this dermatology trial. We've got a dermatologist that's 3 hours away from us. Let's see if we can support him remotely. And so that's what we did.
And what year was this where you guys thought
That was 1999.
so you were thinking remote back in '99,
Yep.
way before the internet was evolved. I mean, Amazon was like a startup back then.
It was so much more challenging to support sites remotely back then. Like, we used to have to ship, boxes of documents back and forth,
Sh
and to make sure that they had copies of everything that we had. And eh, the development of like online meetings and having a connected document sharing portal just changed everything for us.
That was, like, so game changing. Can you imagine? I like doing this because the sponsors like it when I bring them up, but, like, if you'd had a time machine and you had Creo and you showed it to Ted back in '99 and said, "Hey, you can manage your site. You could see what they're doing as they're doing a visit. Here's their eSource, here's their eReg, here's the CTMS. It shows you like everything happening." What would Ted back then think?
Oh, just one, I'd be skeptical because, are you serious? It can do all this.
You
And
would think it's some alien technology. Uh, I mean, these things evolve so quickly, man.
yeah, I just lost my camera. Hang on, I'm trying
I
to get it
see.
back.
It's kind of cool. It's like talking to a go. Maybe you already time traveled back into '99, Ted, and you're telling him about Creo.
Here, I'll fix this. Hang on. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
Ah, no worries. And I mean, Versatile also. Imagine being able to. I think my site has a screening visit today,
Oh, yeah?
and I don't need to be there. That's one of the things like Creo and Versatile allow me to do is like freedom from being there all the time. It's remote. I'm still locally based in Yuma, but It's just crazy how today we take these things for granted. Like, oh, it's not just Creo. There's like 10 other vendors, and there's free ones too, like Viva. But back then, we would have like killed ourselves for this. I remember when I needed a patient, I needed a database for my patient for my site, right? I didn't want to just use Excel or Word, so I went to Staples. This was 2006. I went to Staples and bought my mail list. It was like a mail list for small businesses. It was like a CD-ROM, and I just customized it to make my database. I don't think it was HIPAA compliant or anything, but back then it was not on the cloud. It was just on your desktop.
Yeah.
So yeah, we didn't have to worry about that stuff. But can you imagine? Like I had to like hack this CD-ROM from Staples. No programming skills whatsoever. It looked like crap, but at least I got diagnosis, name, and a phone number. And that was my database. Now it's just thrown in there like free as part of the e-source.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of technology has, and our ability to embrace technology has happened out of necessity. So the when the pandemic hit and we needed to do remote visits at our clinical trial sites, um, we didn't really like the options that sponsors were providing. So we came up with our own remote monitoring portal for sponsors to use, and it also was used in a regulatory inspection, and we were ecstatic when the regulators loved it.
How did you
So
guys pull that off? Like, what was it? Dropbox hacked version of Dropbox, or what?
no, no, it was a company that I can't even remember how we got introduced to them, but they had the technology, and we, investigated it to make sure, because back then, companies were wanting us to have a meeting with the coordinator, like a Zoom meeting with the coordinator, and the coordinator to hold up source note worksheets so that they could review them, and we just thought that was beyond ridiculous.
How ridiculous is that?
And
But that shows you how fast this stuff changed.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, out of necessity,
Wow.
things. What is it? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
That's it's just crazy to me how you guys and evolved, and then it's so rare to see a site still around. So you're saying Probity is the same name as the site you started with.
Yep. Yep. So Probity was founded in 1995, and it's yeah, still around, still kicking, still growing. Actually, we're probably growing faster now than at any point in time. And lots. It's amazing the interest in research out there, and the number of really good clinicians that have been in medicine for 10, 15 years, and they've kind of seen everything that they thought they were going to see. And now, you know what, I did a little bit of research in my earlier days, and I want to get back into it, and that's a really common story that we hear.
Are you seeing a slowdown right now? And it's June, almost July 2023 for those watching in the future. Hello, guys. Uh, are you seeing a slowdown?
Not for us. Things are
Me either.
incredibly busy.
Me too. But
um,
I'm hearing like you've got to be hearing, Room. You're more connected than I am. You go to conferences, and Mike. You know everyone I mentioned. You got to be hearing these same things. Layoffs at CRO.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
I think, but that's also, if you think back in there's always this roller coaster ride in clinical research, these ups and downs. And so one of the ways that we as a company level out these ups and downs is through diversification, is through growth
I
and
love you guys, man. You guys are like my kind of people.
thanks, man. Yeah, no, it's. I think we've seen lots of slowdowns before. When the financial industry collapsed, like what was that? Was that 15 years ago now?
Yeah, oh 08, yeah, that was, like, 3 years into me 2 years into me being a new site owner.
Oh,
I thought
and
I
that must
knew
have
what
been a
the hell
nightmare.
was happening. Oh,
Yeah,
I expanded into the Great Recession, like,
yeah,
and I was so naive. I was, what, 26? So, my one site was doing well. You hear the Great Recession happening, banks going out of business. I'm like, "Yeah, let's open another site in LA. It's a good
yeah,
idea. And then let's do another one in San Bernardino, and then let's hire more people. Oh, this is gonna pass." That's how I was thinking, and I expanded into a downturn. Luckily, I survived. I had to pull some strings to make it survive. I didn't have to let anyone go. But man, did that dude, when I tell you, like, I got diagnosed with hypertension around that time, it took a toll on my life, like, literally.
it does. It's stressful, but
Mhm.
fortunate, like I said, when you're surrounded by good people, it's just amazing what you can accomplish.
Yeah, now you guys are the independent site now, or letting the sites operate independently. Um, have you gotten into, like, CRO type of work? Like, does it blend into, like, phase
Not
1?
Well, we do phase one in disease. So
Ah,
we have
okay.
several of our sites that are set up to be able to do phase one in disease. We don't do the first in human healthy patient studies, but we
Yeah.
do, yeah, we do, the studies in different
So
indications.
the
And
phase 1/2, I've been seeing a lot of those lately.
yep, yep,
You know
yeah,
what
and
I
that's what.
saw?
Oh, go ahead.
The other day I saw, like, somebody reached out to me. They said, "Hey, do you want a diabetes study?" I'm like, "Of course, that's what we do." Like, yeah, we're outpatient site, right? And
Yep.
I get the CDA and I get the synopsis. It's a single ascending dose, multiple ascending dose, one cohort. There's 5 cohorts, 3 of them are healthy and 2 of them are type 2 diabetes with these I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is not, like, what we could do. This is not a diabetes study. This is a phase 1 disguised as a diabetes study." We're seeing a
Well, we're
lot of that
seeing
kind of stuff.
we're seeing more of that now, and we have done those studies as well, where even the first in human is in the condition of study. And so, depending on the molecule and the safety profile, et cetera, so we are
How
starting to see earlier and earlier uh, drugs going into conditions right from the start.
but how are they able to get away with that? Because that's like, I looked at that study, I turned it down, but see, 2006, Dan would have taken it on and found a way to make it work.
Yeah.
2023, Dan, a little more scared.
Oh, you
But
know what? It's amazing what you'll take on in the early days to prove yourself. And because we did studies back then that we just wouldn't accept now because they were too difficult to do.
you
But
think we're less hungry or what?
no, not less hungry. I think
Smarter?
it's a wiser use of your resources.
Yeah.
You got to be careful. That's one of my when it comes to a business development standpoint, like one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give to our sites is learn the art of saying no and learn when it's a good idea to turn down a study because that can be as beneficial for you as actually taking on a project. Because if
Yeah.
you take on the wrong study, it and you underperform, uh, you may toast yourself with that sponsor when may have been willing to come back for the next study that may have been a good study. So yeah, you
Yeah.
got to really be careful the studies you take on now.
I know. I'm glad they're hearing it from me too, because we do preach this a lot. And Ted, most of the time, they're like, "Yeah, yeah, that's a good problem to have, Dan. We'll deal with it when we get to that level." So they're gonna learn the hard way, Ted.
So yeah, that's how we learn the best lessons. But there's this fear of missing out from the
FOMO,
investigators. Yeah,
FOMO is real stuff. So
it is.
this is so cool. We gotta have you on again.
Oh, thanks, man.
What was
It
the
was so much
founder's
fun.
name again?
Dr. Kim Pap.
Dr. Kim Pap. Okay, I
Yeah.
gotta see if I'm connected, and we'll set up like a co interview. That'll be a cool one, just to like take a deep dive. See, we've already done an hour, and it's like I haven't really. gotten into like many of the questions I wanted to ask. I guess one, maybe we can end with this one.
Sure.
You seem to be entrepreneur as a dressed up as an employee.
Yep.
And surely you've thought about starting your own stuff, but you haven't. Eh, I don't know what the question really is, but
Why not?
why not? Or like maybe in the future, or because there's got to be others like you. I feel like you're what's called an intrapreneur. Like you're
Yeah.
an entrepreneur working in a company, which companies need to grow. Like you're probably responsible for a lot of the company's success. Um,
Well,
what are your thoughts on this? I guess.
yeah, absolutely. So I think it comes down to a lot of things. Number one, I'm a really creative person. I I'd like to create things. I do wildlife photography. I
I
found
saw.
my voice to write,
I'm gonna
and
follow the Instagram too.
oh, thanks, man. And so that's one thing is within the circumstance of my job, my role over the years, I've been able to create a lot and had freedom and support to be able to create. And so it's that environment where, yes, you're an employee, but you're also given permission to come up with lots of ideas. And I also like solving problems. And so, when you work with a boss who really is kind of like a visionary who has these dreams, and then you're tasked with, okay, now I can try and find a way to pull that off. It's a really fun environment to work in, and and then you're trying to balance that with your family life
Mhm.
and that security, I guess, of having employment.
Yeah.
When for my kids are older now, but when you have a young family and you've got that security, and yet still be able to create, it's a lot of fun. So yeah, there's been challenges. I won't deny that I've thought about it many times over the years, but I also see the vision of what we're trying to do as a company and where we're trying to go, and that's a really exciting thing to be a part of.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, we'll get into more. Well, I want to do that co-interview, but Ted Trafford, guys and gals, you gotta go connect with this guy. He's amazing. Well, this could have been 3 hours,
Oh,
um,
thanks, Dan. Yeah,
easily.
thanks for having
Ted,
me on.
I appreciate it. We didn't even get into your side hobbies of nature photography or wildlife photography, but I'm gonna go follow the Instagram.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Uh, his LinkedIn is underneath this video and in the show notes. And stay tuned for part two. We're gonna get the founder on, and we're gonna have a conversation. Me, Ted, and
Apps.
Doctor Pap. So sorry. Um, Once I meet him, I'll remember his name though forever.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you, Ted,
thanks, Dan.
and everybody for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Stay tuned. Bye bye.